Willkommen in London, meine Damen und Herren. Das Wochenende hier war heiß und nicht nur heiß, auch lang, so wie in Österreich, einen Tag nach hinten versetzt und beherrscht von einer politischen Schmierenkomödie der besonderen Art. Der Architekt des Brexit, der Chefstratege des Wahlsiegs von Boris Johnson vergangenen Dezember, der Rasputin der Downing Street, Dominic Cummings, wurde beim Corona-Schwindel ertappt. Ob er jetzt gehen muss oder nicht, ist die Frage, die die Briten noch einige Tage ablenken wird von dem Umstand, dass sie jetzt ohne Konkurrenz Pandemie-Europameister geworden sind. 38.000 Menschen sind hier am Virus gestorben. Das ist 8-mal mehr. Also auch wenn man die Bevölkerungsgröße berücksichtigt, 8-mal mehr als auf der Insel der Seligen und Gesunden in Österreich. Großbritannien hat drakonische Zwangsmaßnahmen mit 2-wöchiger Verspätung eingeführt. Deswegen sperrt die Gastronomie und die Hotellerie erst mit 6-wöchiger Verspätung auf. Das nur sozusagen als ein Blitzlicht auf die Pandemiesituation hier. Mein Name ist Christian Kresberg, ich leite das Büro der Wirtschaftskammer in London seit 4,5 Jahren. Das Virus hat mich meiner Lebensgrundlage beraubt, also nicht nur meines gepflegten Kurzhaarschnitts, sondern auch des Zerkauens und Wiederkauens der Gründe, Ursachen und Folgen des Brexit für österreichische Unternehmen. Ist ein Thema, an das sich heute viele gerne erinnern, weil es so klein und leicht und überschaubar und bewältigbar erschien im Vergleich zu dem, was heute vor uns liegt. Für die mit ein wenig Restinteresse am Brexit, er kommt, und zwar wahrscheinlich ungebremst und unfrisiert. Die Briten machen keine Anstalten, die Übergangsfrist am Jahresende endet, zu verlängern. Es scheint auch so, als ob es mit gewisser Wahrscheinlichkeit nicht einmal dieses magere, schwächliche Freihandelsabkommen geben wird, auf das man doch noch gehofft hat. Grund ist wohl der Umstand, dass die wirtschaftlichen Folgen dieses Brexit 0,3, 0,4% der Wirtschaftsleistung über die nächsten 10 Jahre in den Kosten der Pandemie unbemerkt untergehen werden und die Brexiteers, die Hardcore-Brexiteers in der Regierung, die besteht de facto nur noch aus solchen, das zynischerweise verstanden haben. Wenn Sie sich für den Markt interessieren, wenn Sie sich für die laufenden Entwicklungen auch im Zusammenhang mit dem Brexit und die Veränderungen, die auch da auf österreichische Firmen zukommen, interessieren, wir stehen jederzeit zur Verfügung. Unsere Webseite ist sowohl was Brexit-Entwicklungen als auch was Entwicklungen im Zusammenhang mit der Pandemie anlangt, hochaktuell. Aber jederzeit freuen wir uns auf ein Telefonat mit Ihnen, auf einen Videocall, auf irgendeine andere Form des Austauschs. Willkommen heute bei einer Webinarveranstaltung Innovation in der Krise. Das Thema ist heute Design Management, ein Problemlösungs- und Ideenfindungsansatz, for lack of a better explanation, der sozusagen die Methodenlehre des Industriedesigns mit der wissenschaftlichen Machbarkeit und Wirtschaftlichkeitsanalyse von Ideen vereint. Mit Ileana Stigliani haben wir wohl eine der großen Thought-Leaderinnen zu diesem Thema als Sprecherin gefunden und sind stolz darauf, dass sie uns heute zur Verfügung steht. Die Arbeit des Außenwirtschaftscenter Londons lag und liegt vornehmlich natürlich in der Unterstützung österreichischer Unternehmen bei ihrer Geschäftstätigkeit in Großbritannien, aber wir haben den Standort London, unseren Standort hier schon auch seit Jahren für Wissenstransfer genützt. Die 9-Millionen-Metropole ist ein Finanzzentrum, ist der Firmensitz der Fortune 1000, die entweder hier tatsächlich ihre Firmenzentrale oder zumindest ihre Europazentrale haben, ist ein Spielplatz von Thinktanks, von außeruniversitären Forschungsinstituten, und natürlich in dem Großraum London sind 3 der weltbesten 10 Universitäten, Cambridge, Oxford, das Imperial College zu finden, mit dem Imperial College, mit dem wir über eine Kooperationsvereinbarung enger verbunden sind. Damit ist die Dichte und Tiefe der akademischen und unternehmerischen Auseinandersetzung mit Zukunftsthemen größer als anderswo. Und damit ist London auch der ideale Platz, österreichische Unternehmen, dann dieses globale Innovationswissen, das hier gebündelt vorhanden ist, anzubinden und damit future-proof zu machen, auf die Zukunft vorzubereiten. Heute stehen wir vor einer Zukunft, die wir uns vor 4 Monaten weder vorstellen wollten noch vorstellen konnten und von der ich heute sicher bin, dass wir sie bewältigen können, allerdings wahrscheinlich nur dann, wenn es uns gelingt, unsere Werkzeugkästen in der Unternehmensführung und im Technologieeinsatz umzudenken. Deswegen steht Design Thinking auch nicht als einziges Wissensangebot allein in der Prärie. Wir haben in den vergangenen Wochen Themen Corporate Learning, Flexible Working und Branding in Form von Webinaren abgearbeitet. Diese Wissensangebote sind auf unserem YouTube-Kanal nachzuschauen und nachzuhören. Und wir kommen im Juni mit 3 Technologie-Webinar-Angeboten auf Sie zu. Da geht es um das Thema die Krise als Treiber von Technologien. Da geht es um Immersive Technologies, also Virtual, Augmented, Mixed Reality, um die Krise als Treiber von der Digitalisierung der Lieferketten und um die Krise als Treiber der additiven Fertigung machen wir gemeinsam mit unseren Kollegen in New York und in München. At this point, I am done. I would like to thank you again for your visit here in London and hand over to my friend and colleague, Peter Pesel, who will lead through the program, introduce Ileana, and be in conversation with you and her. Please stay healthy, stay safe, make sure that others do too. Keep your spirits up, and I hope to see you soon, either here in London or in Austria, hopefully face-to-face without a mask. Stay healthy. Peter.
Thank you very much, Christian, and a very warm welcome also from my side from London to everyone watching from their laptops, tablets, smartphones. We are happy that you have found us in this virtual space. But before we dive into this very exciting topic of innovation, I would like to let you know that after the talk of our expert, there will be a Q&A session, and you are encouraged to enter questions in a chat box that you should see. Today's title of the webinar is Innovation in Times of Crisis. We want to explore how design thinking can help businesses to turn problems into opportunities. And for this, I'm very happy that we have a design thinking expert from Imperial College London with us. Imperial College London is a world-leading university for science, engineering, and business. In 2018, Reuters named Imperial College as the most innovative university in the UK, ranked it 2nd in Europe. And so I'm very honored to introduce and invite to our virtual space now Dr. Ileana Stigliani. She's Associate Professor of Design and Innovation at the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Department at Imperial College London at the Business School. I've promised her to keep this introduction short. I think the presentation and her work will speak for itself. She has worked with many, many companies in the past. Her research about design thinking has been featured in well-known media outlets like The Economist, Financial Times, BBC, and so on. So I'm looking very much forward to this talk and how design thinking can help our businesses. So I'd like to hand over now to you, Ileana. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for the very nice introduction, Peter, and especially for keeping it short and sweet. I would like to welcome everybody to this webinar. It seems like we have a very high number of attendees, so I'm very happy to share with you my thoughts about how we can, as businesses, how we can innovate and be more innovative in times of crisis. And so, as was previously said, I'm also going to focus on a specific approach to innovation. If you have watched some of the videos that I released, it's a human-centered path to innovation called design thinking. But I will get into the nitty-gritty of the talk in a minute. Because what I want to do now, I want to start with this quote and this image. You were probably expecting a quote from an economist or a businessman or businesswoman. However, I chose to use a quote by Mike Tyson. Definitely somebody who has given a lot of punches in the face, but also received quite a few of them. And I think this quote is a good beginning of this talk because I think it captures the situation that we all found ourselves, maybe at different points in time, given that we are in different countries. But we all had our plans in our personal, professional life. Our businesses were going a certain way. We had a plan, we had a course of action, and then almost all of a sudden a microscopic invisible agent basically gave us a punch in the face and hit us very, very hard. And so I guess you would agree with me that the first immediate reaction was survival first mode. For example, my university, they shut down the campus immediately. They moved everything online in terms of teaching. The president cut her salary for the next 6 months. They announced that they would not invest more money. They would not hire more people. So in other words, business leaders did whatever it took in order to protect and preserve the value of their company, their businesses, their employees. And that's okay. That's exactly the textbook reaction that we should have when an emergency like that strikes. However, as days and weeks passed, I think you would agree with me that lots of businesses, especially the traditional ones, found themselves in very uncertain and dangerous waters. Many people called it uncharted territory. And this microscopic virus actually created a tsunami of new challenges, of new problems, new needs, new behaviors, new pain points that we had to deal with. And you would probably agree with me that this tsunami has definitely brought to life a lot of inefficiencies and inadequacies of our current systems. If I think of the UK, well, I definitely think of the inadequacy of food supply chains, for example, or the inadequacy of procurement of PE, or the inadequacy of the health system, the education system, and I go on and on and on. So this is really a paradigm shift moment, which is very important at this point, because I think we can agree on the fact that one way or another, we're getting through this storm. And actually, you are ahead of the curve and you have reopened earlier than the UK. And so, of course, we're getting through this. But of course, the way we're getting through this, the how we're getting through this, really depends on the type of attitude that or mindset that we decide to have towards the situation. So we could, let's say, decide to be defined by this situation, or decide to define it. We could then, if we don't react, if we don't respond appropriately, we could end up being completely swallowed and swept away by this tsunami. Or if we take the right measures, we could be able to surf the wave, to weather the storm, and to actually thrive, not only now, but also later. So I would like you to think of these two questions, and maybe we can revisit your answers in the Q&A session. So really, the difference between being defined or defining, or being swallowed away or swept away, or actually being able to surf the wave, really depends on the type of mindset, or in organizational terms, the type of culture that we have. On the left-hand side, we have the typical fixed mindset. So people who have a fixed mindset are usually people who see problems as threats that need to be avoided at all costs until it becomes unavoidable, and so they need to react to them. Usually in this type of people and this type of organizations, risks are avoided. Experimentation is not embraced because, as I said, problems are threats, and so they need to be avoided. While on the right-hand side, we have a representation of what in developmental psychology is called the growth mindset. A mindset that, although it may seem paradoxical, that basically frames problems into opportunities, that actually embrace the uncertainty, embrace the ambiguity in order to grow skills, grow knowledge, grow markets, grow customer base, to grow in general through experimentation, through taking small but continuous risks. And so that's what I would invite you to think of. That's the type of mindset shift that a situation like a crisis that we are going through right now is actually creating. And I know that some of you might say, well, this is like ridiculous. How could we consider COVID as the biggest opportunity that ever happened to our business? And I know that it may sound paradoxical and maybe even nonsensical on the surface, but if we ask ourselves this question, what new opportunities could we see, will we see, when we look at the world in this way? And so the main differentiator between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, or a fixed type of organizational culture and a more innovative organizational culture, is innovation, is our ability as organizations, individuals, but then collectively as organizations, to embrace and welcome innovation. In times of crisis and in emergencies like this one, innovation is a must. In other words, it's not a luxury, but it's a survival mechanism. We either innovate or we die, or at least we become irrelevant or very marginal for the market. And so investing in innovation, which may sound paradoxical at this point, because the immediate reaction of business leaders is to actually cancel any innovation budget and to withhold on all innovation projects. But I would like to say it's probably the worst case to do in this type of situations. Actually, there is a research that was conducted by Bain & Company, the management company, that basically found that companies who actually invest in innovation in times of recession are those who thrive not only during recession, but also afterwards when the economy finally picks up. And so my segue is into design thinking, because design thinking is, as I mentioned before, is a human-centered path to innovation, is a way to solve business problems that actually helps organizations routinely come up with new and creative ideas. But before jumping into the real content of design thinking, I would like to tell a couple of stories, a couple of innovation stories. One dates back to 2003 and has as main protagonist Bank of America, that I'm hoping everybody is familiar with. And Bank of America, at the time, they realized that there was a part of the market that they were completely disregarding. Okay, and these people were people who were living paycheck to paycheck. Actually, right now, the reality of these people is quite salient, because if we think of people in the United States, there's quite a big number of people who are in this situation. So if you put yourself in the shoes of people living paycheck to paycheck, what are some of their biggest fears? And I invite you to write them down in the chat, and then Peter will collect them. Well, if we put ourselves in the shoes of these people, definitely our main concern relates to being able to pay our bills, being able to pay rent, being able to put food on the table. There is some psychological research that basically says that when people are in this type of situation, they're so focused on the day-to-day, getting by with their finances, that definitely the last thing they're thinking of is saving money. Okay? And so Bank of America realized that there was this part of the market that was completely uncaptured by their products, and so they approached an innovation and design consulting firm, quite famous globally, called IDEO, to help them find new ways to help financially struggling people save some money. And the hope of the bank at the time, when the banking industry really was not an innovative industry, was very conservative, very rigid, not really the fintech type of space that we can think of today. The hope was to really trigger innovation, to really inject some innovation, some innovative solutions into this industry. Now, what IDEO did was they really embedded themselves into the Bank of America team. So they initially started to understand what all the products on offer were, but most importantly, they started spending time in different households, couples, families, single individuals. They talked to people who were struggling financially, but they also talked to people who were very good at saving money. So that was a very wide sample of people they spent time with, mostly in their homes. And as they synthesized all the information that they collected over the few weeks of their research, they came up with a couple of interesting insights. Well, the first one is probably a little ironical, the fact that women oversaw the household finances. Nothing new under the sun. I would say that happens to my household as well. But the interesting behavior was that some mothers had this practice of rounding up the number in their checkbooks. And by doing so, that made addition easier, but also gave a small buffer in spending. Now, that was just a small behavior, but very significant, insightful behavior that the IDEO people found very, very interesting. And so, of course, I'm cutting a very long story short, but they came with the idea of a new kind of change jar. So instead of putting money in a change jar, they came up with a digital change jar. It's a product that still exists right now. It's called Keep the Change. And it basically works the same way as some mothers were doing their additions. So when using your debit card, you would pay, but then the payment would be rounded up to the nearest dollar. And so daily you would save money without even knowing that you were saving money. You would think, well, what's the innovation there? There's no revolutionary technology. There's no breakthrough technology. There's no AI. There's no Bitcoin. There's no other, super fancy new technology. But that's also the message that I would like to send today. In order to be really innovative, in order to have a huge impact, you don't need a breakthrough technology. Technology is the enabler. So the real crux of many problems are behaviors, are human needs, are human pain points, human challenges. And you might think, well, what type of impact might have Keep the Change might have had? Well, if we think of some of the results, some of the outcomes, after its launch in September 2005, it attracted 2 million customers in less than a year, and overall, over 12 million people signed up to the program, saved more than $2 billion. It's really a super successful product. Now, over the time, Bank of America has been imitated by a lot of other competitors, but at the time, remember, at the time, we didn't even have digital banking. At the time, it was really something disruptive, something really innovative that changed the face of the way people who were struggling financially could actually save some money much more easily than they would currently do without this product. And then I want to tell you a second story. I don't know if you recognize these three very young guys, but these are the three founders of Airbnb. Airbnb, of course, it's a company we're all very familiar with. Now it's super successful, although they're going through themselves a crisis because everything is on hold in terms of renting rooms and homes and so on and so forth. But the real story is that when they started in 2007, and they enjoyed a little bit of success initially, but then in 2009 they were really at a crossroads because they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Okay? They had this cool idea that generated from their own needs. They were spending most of their time coding in order to perfect the platform. But the truth of the matter was that honestly, their revenues barely reached $200 per week. So they were seriously losing a lot of money, and they needed to do something. So they were not different from any other struggling startups, or most of struggling startups out there. So the three founders realized that something wasn't clearly working. And what they started doing, so this is another question for you, what would you do, that I would like to come back later on, maybe in the Q&A. Some might say, well, probably invest in marketing. Well, they didn't have any money, so it was a little tricky. Spend more time coding to perfect the platform. Yes, still, but people were not booking rooms. So what they did was something that was quite counterintuitive. Okay, so they started looking at their ads in New York, because New York was definitely a big hub for them. And what they found in the different ads, they found a common pattern, and they realized that pictures were not professionally taken pictures, were pictures that the hosts had taken with their not so sophisticated cameras and smartphones at the time. And so honestly, the crux of the problem was that people were not booking rooms, mostly because from the pictures, they couldn't see what they were paying for. And if you remember at the time, booking a room in somebody else's place during a vacation or a business trip was definitely a very novel, very new concept. So it was a big barrier for people. Now it's, you know, something that we don't even think about. We don't even blink our eyes about it. But at the time, it was a big barrier. And so the solution that they decided to implement was very non-scalable. So that's another message. Innovative solutions, especially at the beginning, don't have to be immediately scalable. But it worked. So they traveled to New York and they spent a week in different households, with some hosts, talking to the hosts, but also living the Airbnb experience as if they were real users. And they also took some professional pictures and they updated the pictures on the website. And just by changing these, their revenues doubled. Okay, that was a very small, a baby step towards actually really understanding what your users need, not what they want, but what they need, what is important, what is it meaningful for them. So instead of spending time sitting behind their screens coding and coding and coding, the real solution to the problem was going out there, going into the real world and really understanding what hosts and potential guests really needed more than wanted, what was needed there. And so these two stories definitely have something in common. And what they have in common is the fact that they are definitely, the focus of attention is represented by human beings. You will not hear from me customers. I am not going to be, you need to be customer centric. Because everybody says they are customer centric, but also because design thinking is more than that. Design thinking is human-centered. Let's not forget that, especially right now, it's not just clients and customers' needs that we need to be aware of, but it's also employees. There's also a lot of other stakeholders who are finding themselves in a completely uncharted territory. And so the design thinking as a human-centered approach starts by understanding the needs, the motivations, the aspirations, the behaviors, and especially the pain points, because they signal problems of the people, the human being who are affected by these problems, instead of taking a business or process-centric approach where here's the process, here are the outcomes that we want to achieve, then let's push out solutions that we don't know whether they are meaningful or not for people. So it's usually the needs of human beings that drive growth, that drive the actions of the business, without, of course, disregarding considerations about technological feasibility and business viability. But I will tell you more in a couple of minutes. And I don't know if you remember, at the beginning of this webinar, I really talked about a shift in the mindset. Because, you know, there's a lot of talk about design thinking as a methodology, as a set of tools and methods. Yes, okay, that's fine. However, that's only a very marginal understanding of what design thinking. Ultimately, design thinking is a change in our mindset. It's a change in the way we look at problems. Too often, we look at symptoms, okay? Symptoms that are above the surface. However, what design thinking leads us to do and somehow forces us to do is to go to the underlying root causes of a problem. Because if we attend to the symptoms, what can happen is that we are solving for the symptoms, but then the problem will reoccur because we haven't solved the root causes. It's like, you know, when you go to the doctor and the doctor is only treating your symptoms, but it doesn't go to the root cause of the problem that will definitely solve all your problems, will make all your symptoms disappear. So it's really a shift in the perspective, similar to what I said previously. The backbone of design thinking as a methodology is a process that, I mean, it has different visual representations out there. I like to use the double diamond, which has been developed by the UK Design Council, mostly because it really captures the essence of this methodology, but also this way of thinking. As you can see, it's a methodology that is based on the alternation of divergent and convergent thinking. The divergent thinking is the expansive thinking, the traditionally creative thinking, while the convergent thinking is more the analytical thinking. That's the one we are more used to. And so this is very important because sometimes people have an initial reaction and say, well, I cannot do design thinking because I'm not creative. I don't know how to think expansively. And then my answer is, well, if you follow the methodology will help you, will nudge you to think more expansively. Not only, but if you work in teams, because design thinking thrives when people work in teams, and the team is diverse enough to have people who are more naturally divergent thinkers and people who are more naturally convergent thinkers, then we are going to be able to cover each other's blind spots. So you as an analytical person will thrive in the converging phases, while you'll probably have to take a back seat or maybe leave the lead to your teammates in the more divergent thinking. So it all starts with discovering the problem. It starts by doing small scale, mostly qualitative, which can then be complemented by more big data type of research, but definitely starts with research and with the exploration of the problem. Because the discover phase is really aimed at understanding what the real problem is or what the real root causes of the problem are. If our sales are down, there might be 10, 15, 20 different reasons why, and we don't want to make assumptions. We might think we know, and sometimes we do, but more often than not, we might not know. And especially now when needs are completely changed, behaviors are changed, we don't know our customers, our clients that well anymore. So it's really about being inquisitive, being curious about what the problem really is. And then it's really about synthesizing all this information, not analyzing, but synthesizing, interpreting, making sense of the information in order to identify the real insights. So for example, in the case of Airbnb, the real insight was that it's not that people didn't necessarily buy into the concept, but given that the pictures were not high quality, they didn't book rooms because they were unsure about what they were getting themselves into. So that was the crux of the problem. And then you use these insights as the springboard of your ideation, so the develop phase. Too often in companies, problems are taken for granted. And so what happens is that, oh, let's organize a brainstorming session and let's use a lot of colored post-it notes, and you know, we develop a lot of ideas, we cover the walls of our meeting rooms, or now virtually using other platforms with a lot of post-it notes, but very often nothing happens after that. And the reason is, well, there are different reasons, but one of the reasons is that because sometimes we don't even know whether the problem is the right one. Not only, but we develop ideas based on our assumptions, and assumptions can be ill-defined ill-based. Okay, and so it is really important that we do the initial exploration, the initial qualitative, but also a bit of quantitative research in order to get to those nuggets of information that are the insights to develop ideas. And then once we develop ideas, we need to identify the strongest ones, not for us, but mostly the strongest ones for the people we are designing for. And then we prototype them, which is a very important phase of design thinking. And then we test them, because testing is important as a way to gain more feedback. So we can refine our ideas. We can test some of, for example, the inevitable assumptions that we might have. So in a nutshell, this is what design thinking is. And I would like to draw your attention to this other visual representation that actually may emphasize a little bit more the iterative nature of this methodology, because of course we visually represent it in a linear way, but that's just for ease of presentation. The phases often overlap with each other, and there's a lot of feedback loops, lots of iterations among the different phases. And as you can see in this slide, we start with a general problem statement, but then through the discover and the define phases, we get to specific problems. Okay, specific and often more manageable problems. And once we have the specific problems, we can have more specific solutions, or we can have the right or the most plausible solutions for these specific projects. So some principles underpinning design thinking. I think this doesn't come as news to you, but it's fundamentally human-centered. So it really relies on our ability to empathize with the people that we are designing for. The important message is that we're not designing, we're not solving problems for ourselves, but we're solving problems for our employees, for our clients, for our customers. And so it is very important to get into that mindset, because empathy is really about putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else and try and see problems, try and see the world through their eyes. Just an anecdote, often, well, not often, sometimes people just say, well, I am not empathetic. I cannot do this. I cannot really put myself in the shoes of somebody else. And then my answer is, well, that basically tells me that you're either a psychopath or a sociopath. Because according to psychologists, every human being is born with empathy, unless they develop some personality disorders like becoming psychopath or sociopath. So everybody has that muscle or their ability in themselves. It's about practicing and developing it over time. Second principle of design thinking is that it really allows to innovate in a lean and agile way. We're not looking for perfection when we prototype and test ideas, absolutely not. We're looking for quick, rough prototypes that nevertheless can be very, very useful in testing certain characteristics, testing certain assumptions, and to get feedback from clients, employees, suppliers, customers, in order to improve the solution. I was reading an article on HBR with which I really agree, and they were saying, especially in times of crisis, perfectionism will not lead you anywhere. This is the perfect time of testing quickly, testing in a lean and agile way, without investing too much money. I would say that the real investment, if you're thinking, oh my God, do I have the budget to do that? The real investment needs to happen in the beginning of the methodology, when you invest a little bit of money in that discovery phase that will give you those nuggets of information based on which you can then develop creative and innovative solutions. Failing to invest in the beginning, then it's gonna set you up for results that are not so good. I would say suboptimal results. Another principle is definitely this one, which is very important. And design thinking uses failure as a learning opportunity. So in other words, given that it's very iterative, it's very based on prototyping, testing, getting feedback, then refining the prototype, failure is not framed necessarily in negative terms. That doesn't mean that we want to fail necessarily, but failure is part of what I call the innovation equation. There is a little bit of chaos or inefficiency coming from experimenting. But if we never experiment, if we never push ourselves outside of our comfort zone, then we will never come up with really, truly innovative ideas. So the idea is to fail as early as possible if we have to, but always fail forward. What does that mean? That failing just for the sake of failing is, of course, sorry for the pun, but it's a failure. However, if we frame failure as a way to gain more insights, more feedback, and then to perfect and to improve, then failure is not as negative as we are used to thinking so far. And so by doing so, also design thinking seeks solutions that are holistic. Definitely, I emphasized a lot the focus on people needs and aspirations, what we call desirability, human desirability. But I mentioned before, without disregarding technological feasibility and business viability. Of course, we're not disregarding them. We would be fools if we were to just develop what people need without actually realizing what is viable for the business or what is feasible from a technological point of view. But I think the main point is that, again, technology is the enabler. Technology is not the main driver, is the enabler through which solutions, meaningful solutions for human beings, are deployed and implemented. So in so doing, design thinking creates value. And I want to differentiate between the dollar or euro or pound or the money value of design thinking. And I invite you to search online the latest report that McKinsey has published, where they have basically measured the performance of companies who have systematically invested in design and design thinking, and they have found that these companies outperform their competitors on different levels: profitability, growth, and customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. So they definitely measured positive results. But I would like to invite you to also consider a broader concept of value. That's the business value of design thinking. And again, if you have watched some of my videos, you will probably have heard me saying, ultimately, embedding design thinking into your organization boils down to a cultural change. So what design thinking can do can definitely improve some metrics. There are things that we can measure, we can count, but it changes mindsets, it changes behaviors, and ultimately it changes the culture. Because especially when you're going through a crisis, companies that have an innovative culture are companies who are in a privileged position. And I would say that also companies who are smaller and medium-sized, they are in a privileged position. However, there are good examples of big organizations that have been able to transform their culture in order to become more innovative. And this is a slide that gives you just a flavor of what's going on out there. I have identified different companies who are definitely leading the way when it comes to being innovative through design thinking. You see examples in finance, in travel, consumer products, innovation technology, healthcare. I would say that probably healthcare is the one that is really lagging behind, but it's the one that is really in need of innovating systems in general. But there is a growing awareness in the corporate world at large that good design eventually translates in good business. So basically investing in design and design thinking leads to positive results when it comes to their company's bottom lines. And I would like to leave you a a few suggestions about what you can do. Okay, because probably you're wondering, oh, that this talk is really nice, but concretely, what can we do? And I have given, I'm going to give advice when it comes to the short, medium, and long term. So the first thing is take some time to reflect after this talk, if you have enjoyed it, is think about how design thinking can help your business. Once again, go back to that question that I asked you initially. What if COVID-19 was the best thing, the best opportunity that ever happened to my business? Okay. However, in doing so, keep in mind that it's not business as usual anymore. There are new problems, there are new challenges, there are weaknesses, there are new pain points, new needs, new behaviors. So it is really important to be also forward thinking in terms of what will be the benefits of design thinking given the new problems that my company, my organization is dealing with. And also get your organization, if you are the CEO, if you are the leader, then get your organization excited about it. If you're not, then make sure that your CEO is really excited about it, and also the organization. So it's about, if I can use the metaphor of a car, it's like igniting the engine, starting the car. So you need to start interest, you need to start some momentum inside the organization. Feel free to also share some of the slides. After igniting the engine, you need the fuel. And the fuel is accessing the right resources. Now, I want to be very, very honest with you in saying that given that the awareness of the benefit of design thinking is growing rapidly in the corporate world, there is also a lot of nonsense out there. Everybody is writing anything they come up with every day. So it is really key that you access the right resources, resources that are legitimate. So don't fall into the traps of believing all the lies that everybody is going to tell you. So these slides, I hope you will find them useful, but there are also a lot of other books and articles out there, but choose legitimate sources, because I have found things that have left me completely gobsmacked. Also, what I would say that if you really want to become innovative, if you really want to develop an innovative culture, you need to prepare for the systemic change, because your organization will be able to routinely come up with innovation, not only by using a methodology. So beware of all those who try and sell you workshops, and the workshops as if they are solving everything. Yes, workshops are the first step in an action plan for systemic change. You need to align the structure of your organization with the processes, with the methodologies, together with the leadership style, and ultimately, of course, the main values, the main principles of your culture. And among the different actors out there who can help you prepare for this systemic change, Imperial College has very recently, just before we went into lockdown, has launched a new initiative called the Imperial Business Design Studio, which is a place where academics and practitioners come together in order to help organizations who want to embark in the journey of embedding design thinking, maybe in order to implement digital transformation, or in general, in order to transform their businesses. So you can reach out to us. We are very looking forward to helping companies as much as possible. As I said, just beware of those who promise you that with a one-day workshop that will solve all your problems. It's really a matter of systemic change. It's not easy, but it can be done. However, a lot of companies who try and become innovative, they fail because they don't prepare and they don't take the right actions in order to do so. So this is really my last slide, and I really hope that this talk gave you enough insights and food for thought. And I am really looking forward to hearing the questions, and I'm looking forward to a lively discussion. We have approximately 10 minutes left, so I'm leaving the floor to Peter, who has been collecting all the questions.
Thank you, Ileana. Thank you very much, first of all, for this very interesting talk. Very many insights here. And yes, questions are already streaming in, but please enter your questions in the chat box, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. Also try to summarize some of them. So there's already one question that has two parts. First part is, what is the biggest challenge for companies to start implementing design thinking? You've already mentioned workshops can be one start, but maybe there's something else. And B, once they have decided to take up design thinking, what are the most common mistakes for companies to do when trying to implement it?
So I think I mentioned that in one of the videos, is probably thinking that using some tools and using some methods, including some post-it notes, represents the solution to all the problems. So I think it's the main challenge is having the wrong attitude towards it. So, for example, a user journey is an amazing tool in order to understand the pain points and phases of your user's experience that are not working. But that's not what design thinking really is. It's really that transformation from an organizational point of view. It's really about the values. Okay, so the main challenge is thinking that the methodology trumps the value, the values underpinning design thinking, the principles, because you cannot necessarily implement the methodology as is, okay? But you can embed and internalize in your organization the principles that inspire the methodology, and you can combine the current methodologies that you have with this new principle. That will mean redefining some of the methodologies, but it's not really about picking the methodology off the shelf and then just exposing it to your organization. It doesn't work that way.
Okay. Let's keep at the topic of implementing it. It seems like design thinking is a very universal methodology which can be applied to all kinds of sectors. One question was asked: how can we implement design thinking into politics? Are there already examples?
I mean, politics is probably a field where design thinking would yield the biggest benefits if, honestly, our politicians would really put themselves in the shoes of real people. I think that policies would be completely different. I think that, and I don't know whether the attendees will agree with me or not, but policymakers most of the time issue policies just to penalize us or to punish us. Okay. While if you take a more human-centered approach and you really understand why certain behaviors are in place, then probably you can come up with solutions that are more human-centered and actually will solve the problems, will solve the source of the problem.
Okay. One very specific question that I like is a specific one where apparently someone has already experience with innovative approaches. The question is, as companies adopted Agile, there were jokes that companies who adopted it just for the name of it, they were actually doing water scrumfall. What are the common pitfalls for companies moving to this way of operating and how to avoid it?
Well, as I said before, I would like to clarify that although design thinking is an agile way of developing innovations, is different from agile with a capital A, that's for software development. But going back to the question, I think that it's really, if we take the methodology and we just put it on top of our organization, but we continue and we claim we're doing something new, but we continue to operate as normal, then every initiative will fail. So going back to what I said previously is, I would be as provocative as saying, forget about the methodology, take the principles. What are the principles? The human-centeredness, the agility, the tolerance for failure, the holistic value creation. how do you embed those principles into your organizations, into your methodologies? And then you'll see that companies will realize, well, if we really want to be agile, we need to get rid of the waterfall. Okay, so unfortunately, there is some legacy that needs to be let go, but it's also unrealistic to think that as a business leader, you walk into an organization and then you say, well, from tomorrow, we're going to change everything completely, because people resist change inevitably. And so it's important, A, to communicate the extent of the change, the reason of the change, but also it's not that everything has to change. It's not that all the processes will have to be thrown out of the window. They will have to be adapted. They will have to be revised, but it's not just starting from a completely clean slate, if I'm making sense.
Yeah. You partly already answered, I think, one of the questions coming as well. Are there any ISO standards for corporate operations, how to introduce principles and qualify as design thinking company? Is there anything such as a benchmark?
So I don't know if I understand the question correctly, but there are exemplars of big corporations out there who have embarked on this journey. Pepsi, for example, is one of them. Samsung is definitely one of them. IBM, SAP. I don't think there are certifications, but I think it's more in terms of getting positive outcomes out of this change and transformation. The BBC is also on this journey. A lot of banks, especially in the UK, Barclays, Lloyds Bank, they are all embedding the principles of design thinking. But I don't know if the question was aimed.
I think the question was, what makes a company a design thinking company? Are there any standards that you implement?
I see. Well, I would say, going back to those principles that I said, a company that is human-centered, and so it actually understands that empathizing with your employees or the other stakeholders is very important. A company that is willing to invest in the research, the upfront research, knowing that spending a little bit of money upfront will actually save a lot of money down the line. Organizations that tolerate failure but don't tolerate incompetence, of course. So they frame failure as opportunities to learn and to grow. And so they're not afraid of quickly trying new solutions, testing new solutions, knowing that this feedback will be very, very beneficial. So I would say that these are the main traits of design thinking companies.
Okay, there's also a lot of comments coming in. Many people say thank you for this interesting talk. Some also thank you for the very valuable last couple of slides where you mentioned some of the literature and on design thinking at the very end. There's also one publication that now a viewer was mentioning in the chat box. It's a report, and I know this one as well, a report by the University of Potsdam, who was publishing a report a few years ago on the current state of design thinking practice in organizations.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's about the real life usage of design thinking. And one of the findings was that design thinking was used in companies of all sizes. And I think this is also what you mentioned in your talk. Is it maybe even an advantage if you're a smaller company? Because given the need for an organizational change and the change in the company culture that you've also mentioned in your talk, maybe this is an advantage if the hierarchy is not as big.
Yes, definitely small, medium organizations are in a privileged position. That doesn't mean that big organizations cannot change, but it requires more effort. It requires a longer time span. It requires definitely a more thought through plan for big organizations, but it can be done.
Okay. One very specific question before we have to wrap up, I think. How can a company introduce design thinking in the context of intrapreneurship? What steps are critical to take in order to maintain or turn the company operations into success?
Okay, so again, it's really about making design thinking usual modus of operandi. Okay, so it becomes the way we do things here, and then we can apply that to many different situations. It could be entrepreneurship or it could be intrapreneurship. I would say though that in the case of intrapreneurship, probably as far as I can think of, it is also important to unlock certain resources inside the organization. So actually, if I can combine this question with the question about what are the main challenges could be that you don't have enough support from the top. Okay, and so in order to do so, you need to have some quick wins to show that by applying design thinking, you can, for example, be able to come up with innovative solutions to long-standing problems that have not been solved using traditional problem-solving approaches. But I think that applying design thinking for entrepreneurship, so spotting opportunities and or actually turning problems into opportunities, I think that's probably one of the best application of design thinking inside an organization.
And I'm pretty sure you could come up with many more examples. And there's also more questions here that we unfortunately cannot answer anymore. We've reached already the hour mark. But thank you very much. It seems like there was a lot of interest sparked from the audience. Thank you, Ileana, for taking your time. I would like to thank everyone at home for watching, and hope to see you again soon at the next webinar. So goodbye from London and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.